Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Punch Kick Choke Chat. We're coming to you special tonight from 8:30 p.m. Central Time or 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for joining us later if you're here on the live Zoom. And I just want to say how excited we are tonight to be chatting with Sensei Darryn Melerine. And normally we start with a big topic, but our show will be just a touch shorter tonight because we started later. So what I want to do is first introduce my co-hosts. I'm here with Sensei Randy Dauphin, Sensei Niklaus Suino, and Hanshi Gary Legacy. And what I simply want to say about that, we're on episode 188 tonight. Obviously, we'll do something fun and exciting for the 200th, but I just want to say that's 188 nights of commitment from these gentlemen. They've been here more than I have because I have had to miss a number of nights. And I just want to say that commitment to this podcast is the same commitment they've had, two of them, for over 50 years, to making sure they show up to class, they offer the thing. And for me, it's an honored pathway to follow. So really, I just want to say thanks to my teachers and my co-hosts tonight for the commitment that lets this show and these clubs keep running. So now I'm going to give it to Sensei Dauphin to introduce our guest tonight.
Thanks, Sean. Sensei Melerine, can you just angle like we're getting your coworker there in the
Yep.
podcast? So we'd like to keep
Like
it on you. Perfect, awesome.
You're welcome.
So Sensei Melerine's journey in martial arts began in 1989, coincidentally the same year that I started doing martial arts, and he started that under the tutelage of Sensei Jack E. Garrett, great name by the way, who is a direct disciple of martial artist Jacques, Lagrand, and Frank Curtis. Through his studies of Jujitsu and Judo and weapons training, Sensei Melerine developed a deep understanding of techniques rooted in practical and effectiveness for real life application. Over the years, he's had the privilege to train and share the mats with some of the most renowned martial arts masters. Little known names like Judo Gene LeBell, Wally Jay, Carlos Machado, and the champ, Daniel Cormier, right?
That is true, yes. He is from Louisiana as well, so.
Amazing. Sensei Melerine is a Godan in Jujitsu. That I think the style is Minami Ryu Jujitsu and Budoshin Jujitsu. He's been recognized as a Godan by the American Jujitsu Association and the United States Jujitsu Federation. In 2022, he was honored with the title of National Jujitsu Sensei by the USA Unified Martial Arts Hall of Fame. Sensei Melerine is the head instructor of the Minami Ryu Jujitsu in Janshin Dojo in Louisiana, where he's sitting right now. He regularly teaches classes, conducts seminars, and collaborates with martial arts organizations, both domestically and internationally. That's how we met, actually, internationally. He leads a lot of self-defense and awareness, self-awareness seminars for law enforcement agencies like SWAT teams, military branches, and even special forces. From me, a couple of comments. We met a few years ago at Hanshitarian's Capital Conquest. One thing I'd say about him, he was instantly liked and accepted by the echelon of that group. There's the upper echelon of that group, and he was in there right away. Everybody loved him. His mats are always full. Like if you go to his mat, he's always full. That's because he has a really high skill level, and he's also a very charismatic instructor. He just is one of those people that his magnetism is really high on the mat. One thing I want to say is I got to know him last year at Capital Conquest when Suino Sensei and I were going to do this Tamashi Gary seminar. And for some reason, he just decided to come and hang with us for a half a day in the back warehouse of this place. And he helped us roll, tie, and soak 500 tatamis for people to go up on stage and cut the next day. My daughter's trained on his mat. She came, and actually one of Sensei Suino's students, who's my daughter's boyfriend, trained on his mat. They both love training with him. And I'm really proud to know him, proud to be his friend, and proud to have him here on the show tonight.
Thanks, Sensei Dauphin. And by the way, one thing I want to say, because I normally say this before the intros, is if you're on YouTube with us, thank you so much. Hit that subscribe, hit that like, comment beautiful or awful things. We love all of it. If you're listening on the podcast, we're really happy. We hope you're driving safely. But if you're here on the Zoom call, you're here in real time with this living history we're creating, and we ask for your questions and your input in the chat button down below that just got lit up. So we look forward to your questions and your comments. And let's get going with Sensei Melerine right now. Sensei, it's such a pleasure to have you. And where we like to start with our guests is what was it like for you growing up, and what brought you into your first club?
What a great question. And if you don't mind, I would just like to again thank all of you. As the hospitality that y'all all are expressing for me today is the gratitude I can't emphasize enough. And the introduction that Randy just did, thank you so much. That I respect, and I mean y'all are as close to me as how you express just now, and I can't emphasize that enough. So I appreciate that sincerely to all of you. And then to answer your question, what got me into martial arts? My dad started me at a very young age of just a level of competitiveness and just trying to make to have a good to be a good person, to have humility in growing up, to have respect in growing up, to as you mature to be just a responsible good adult. And so and I did have brothers, right? And so you always take care of your brothers. And I have one that's older and one that's younger, and we're all within a couple years apart, one above, one below. And so we were always very, very close. And so protecting each other was a big thing, for my family, very family oriented. We've been very close to my father, my mother, and my brothers as well as the rest of the family. So my dad did these things for me that before CrossFit ever became a term, for me to be able to continue to develop my own physical ability. And I just took an interest in that. And so he also was a Marine and had worked with me on my striking abilities, passing me off into doing some boxing, and then also into some different type of I guess what you would call like amateur wrestling type of things. And I really enjoyed that. And I became pretty good at it. And so I wanted to explore. I've always known about martial arts. I mean, growing up, everybody's intrigued by martial arts. I've always wanted to learn more about how to be better. But also not how I can be better. What was real? What was practical? What was going to be effective in a real life scenario? And so as I started to age, and I was just about to graduate high school, and I graduated early. I graduated at 17 because of my birthday being in October. And so right out of high school, I said, okay, I would like to pursue a martial art. And so I'm from a small town, a small community just outside of New Orleans called St. Bernard Parish. And so what I did was, and this is back in 1989. And so I went and researched every place that I could find using the phone book, right? We didn't have the internet back in that day. And so I'm thumbing through pages and going to wherever I can get the means to be able to find a place within my local community. And then I expanded it. And I went through New Orleans and I went through Jefferson Parish. And if you're not familiar with that territory, it's a pretty long trek. It's about an hour and a half if you didn't have traffic going from the spot that I would live in, or maybe even 2 hours to the last place that I would go, trying to research and evaluate every martial art facility that I could possibly visit and watch myself. And then I wanted to sit in the class. I didn't want to participate. I just wanted to sit and evaluate it. And I wanted to use my own judgment on what I thought would be practical and would not be practical in a real life scenario. And so I started to eliminate different styles, not by discrediting anybody. I didn't have the knowledge to be able to discredit anyone or anything like that. I just had my own concept, my own idea of what I thought would be practical in a real life scenario. And I started to eliminate a bunch of them. And one day on my way home, back in St. Bernard Parish, I happened to drive past this one dojo that I kept passing up every single time because it was tucked away in this corner. It didn't appeal to me for whatever reason. And so I said, I'm going to stop here. And when I went in there, was the first day that I ever met my still today same Sensei, Jack Garrett. And so I walked in the door. He introduced himself to me. There was a bunch of people on the mat. He took the time to come over and introduce himself to me, and then started to tell me about Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And I'm going to say Japanese Jiu-Jitsu because Jiu-Jitsu, Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, as y'all all, I'm sure are familiar with, could be a name, whatever names. And our system is Minami Ryu, as Randy was saying, Minami Ryu Jujitsu. Minami Ryu just means Southern style. And so that's his system. And so he started to share with me Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And I was overly excited about the reality aspect of it and the application and how effective it was. And from that day on, as I mentioned, I never turned back. I was able to continue my endeavors on developing my striking through different boxing curriculums, some wrestling, and then I stayed in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, and he's my same sensei back in that day is literally sitting in front of me on the mat right now, still here today. And so that was my start.
Sensei, that's incredible, and you'll find a lot in common with us on this show. And Sensei Dauphin can maybe break that open a little more. But I wanted to ask you something before we move on. How did you know at that age, before you had started martial arts, that you needed it to be effective? Because especially back in that late 80s period, Karate Kid, Bruce Lee movies, Chuck Norris, a lot of people were just attracted to the general vibe of it without thinking too much about real life effectiveness. But also, what made you, once you walked in that club, go, oh, no matter what my homework's been, this is the one? So what made you instinctively look for it, and what made you realize you found it?
Sean, as detailed as your questions are, they're softballs, right? And so I appreciate the fact that you lobbing these out to me. But you're right. The martial arts, as we all know, goes in these generational trends, right? And so there, from either your Bruce Lee to your David Carradines to your Karate Kids, and you have all of these different martial arts that come out, and a lot of them on the silver screen, or movies and stuff like that. They're very theatrical, and so everybody was participating in these. I just never was the person that was into until after high school. As I mentioned, that's when I was just graduating, when I started to get into martial arts. But all of my friends, a whole bunch of my friends, there was countless people in all of these other styles: Shoto Run, Wado Ryu, Taekwondo, like all of these styles of karate and different types of martial arts, or whatever the generational trend was at the moment, they were taking them. And so me always doing boxing, I was one dimensional. But all of my friends being able to participate and go into all of these different types of competitions and brag about how they were advancing in their own systems and their own styles would always challenge me. I did well with it, right? I didn't do bad at all. I still did really well, but I didn't have everything else that they were going through. But I didn't want that, because I noticed quickly, I don't know if it was just something that was just second nature to me or what, but I picked it up really fast. The techniques that they were doing wasn't working against me, just from the simple things that I knew that I felt like were basic. And so that intrigued me more. Okay, what can I do? And so I saw the things that they were doing. I said, okay, I don't think that's going to be practical for me. What can I do to advance that?
Now, we'll talk about Daniel Cormier a bit later, I hope. But I do imagine, this is pre-UFC, but we did learn in the late 90s how effective wrestling is. So I imagine that was one of those things that did give you a sense of, oh, okay, I do have some tools that, because MMA is not really a term then, but you're already in a place where you're touching on an MMA buy.
Yeah, of course. That's what I was talking about when I first started, right? I was talking about the term CrossFit. Well, no difference with MMA, right? Same difference. It just wasn't a term yet. Mixed martial arts wasn't something that everybody was familiar with. It was basically just fighting or combat, right? And so you had these things. My whole thing, though, was I never wanted to be on a floor. Unfortunately, and through my youth, one of the other things that I had was a lot of real life experience. And so the last place that I ever wanted to be was on the ground in one of those scenarios. And so my whole objective was to stay off of the floor. But if it went there, I knew how to be able to defend myself if it did go there, right? And so that was one thing that I was able to get into and be extremely effective with it. And my sensei, again, to his credit and my benefit, knew a lot of these techniques that people are seeing today that are now called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that we were doing years before anybody even recognized the sport, MMA, combat sports, and now the most common thing being out there, the most common term that you hear is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
And you recognize that when you started with him.
Absolutely.
Right on. Let me throw it to you, Sensei Suino, and maybe you can keep running with it as much as you like. But he just said something that I think you'd probably agree with about Japanese jiu-jitsu, that, you know, a lot of what became really in vogue and fashionable with BJJ is maybe something that had been around for a while.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that with historical judo too, right? So much of what what was done many, many years ago now shows up, and people are surprised to learn that there's a long history. But Darryn, we talked about this behind the scenes, behind the stage while we were rolling mats for hours and hours a few months ago. But I would love to have you kind of share a little bit about the style of jujitsu you practice. What are the representative techniques? You know, are you guys doing joint locks, takedowns, chokes? Like, kind of what's the percentage of each? Can you just give us a look at that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and that's a great question, because you lead me right into what is really a very, very adamant topic for me. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like I want to protect and preserve what I have known the lineage and origin to have most martial arts come from in Japanese jiu-jitsu, right? And so Japanese jiu-jitsu, what most people are not familiar with is that it's everything. And BJJ, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, or what they refer to as BJJ today, is just a fraction of what Japanese Jiu-Jitsu is. But most people don't understand that. And I get it, and they're very protective of it because that's what they've learned, that's what they've been doing. But the reality is the origins of their art, their system, and I'm not saying, it's not discrediting anybody. With all due respect to everyone, there's some very good practitioners that are good in that system, that style of what's called Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They're very good at competition, and there's no discrediting there. I just want to make sure that I emphasize that. But it is just a very small fraction of Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. And the Japanese Jiu-Jitsu that we do is everything. It is joint locks. It is throws. It is striking. It is come-alongs. It is restraints. It is nerve attacks. And then most people would say, okay, are you doing judo? And yes, it's judo as well, because if you look back, you really kind of trace everything back and you take it back to the origins. Japanese Jiu-Jitsu was developed by the samurai, and then the samurai needed to do something to train, and then they had to be able to work with each other again. And then the Olympics came along. Here we go. We got to have a sport. We want to have judo. Judo is the oldest sport in the Olympics today, still today. It's just a piece of Japanese jiu-jitsu. It's just a fraction of it, right? And so as things kind of evolved and other fractions of it have broken off, then we start to have all of these different systems and styles of what we now refer to different things. Ultimately, it's all Japanese jiu-jitsu.
And then talk to us about your pressure testing. That's a big term we use here. I mean, even our club, you know, we're a heavy fighting club, and we want to make sure we're pressure testing that way. Sensei Suino obviously does that, and we do it with him on the ground as well. So when you're doing, let's say, your Minami, am I saying that right? Minami Ryu?
Minami Ryu, yes.
Minami Ryu. What does a training session look like? What is, or is it varied because of all the techniques you're talking about?
It does vary. And so we traditionally start off every class just no different than anyone else. Every class involves a warm-up session. So we do our stretching, our calisthenics, we get the heart rate up in preparation. But the most important thing that we learn, that we emphasize every single class, is the basics, and the basics of learning how to fall correctly to prevent injury, of course, right? If you don't know how to fall in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, then likely you're not going to be able to make the next class. And so that's one of the things that we focus on every single class. Doesn't matter what level you are, you're still doing the same falls that everybody in the class is doing. And then once we get through the warm-up session, then we'll do some type of drills. And the drills could be like ichikomis, where we're doing some practicing in throws, enters, we're working on footwork and tie sabak, and then we're working on different lifts and how to effectively perform techniques as a throw is designed, or a joint lock, right? Once we do that, we specifically pick out one or two techniques or even transitions of techniques, and we start to work on those techniques. We don't typically get more than two or three techniques a night in a classroom setting because we have an open floor mat. And so what I mean by that is everybody that's on the mat could be a white belt all the way to the highest ranking black belt that we have. Everybody's still on the floor. And so we break that up by allowing the people that have lesser experience work to their ability and their experience level all the way to the advanced person, and then advancing them with the same techniques, doing different things, or even advancing the technique into a transition of another. And once we finish that, we spend some time on working technique. Then we'll do drills, and the drills can be a lot of different things. It depends on the night. Some days we'll do multiple attackers, and so we'll put one person in the center of the floor, which is actually what's going on right in front of me right now. And they'll have to be able to defend themselves against multiple attackers. Defendable attacks, they're not going full speed. It's just drills, right? But they are going to get simulated attacks. They're not choreographed attacks. They're attacks that have commitment and intent behind it. And depending on your level of experience, how fast the attacks come and how fast the other person attacks you. That's one thing. And we also do groundwork as well. So we don't just stand up all the time, even though that's not a place that we want to practice being, but we do practice being there, right? So two different types of things. So we do groundwork, just like BJJ practitioners. We'll do that as well, and we'll run different gauntlets on that. So we'll spend the amount of time. We have timers in the dojo that will put different rounds in there. We put people in a disadvantaged position and a person in an advantage position, and then we make them fight to get to either submission or to an advantage spot until the clock runs out. And then we swap that. And so the disadvantaged person that started will now be in an advantage position, and then the other person will be in a disadvantaged position. And then we run another clock. And then we alternate every single person down a line to where almost everybody in class, depending on the size of the class and how much time we have, because we just do a minimum of a minute each round, top and bottom, if or disadvantage, advantage. And then we move on to the next person. Once we're finished with that, if we have time allowing, and depending on the night, our classes are typically an hour and a half, 2 hours long. So depending on how much time we have, we either go into some overtime, but then we'll do some randori. And our randori is pretty aggressive. Again, depending on the experience level of the individual that is the Tori, how many attackers they have, and the attacks continue to come with commitment and intent. And the Tori has to be able to defend himself for a time period, and depending on that level, again, a minimum of a minute to be able to defend himself. And if you can imagine, the class is pretty intense. Yeah. So by this time, it's hard to breathe. But one of our catchphrases is, if you're ever going to fail, we want you to fail right here where you have family, and not outside of our door where you don't have nobody that can help protect you.
We love that. So there's something you said that we all have in common, but you're blending the newest person with the most advanced person in the same class. And I think if you've watched this show, we like to go around the horn on certain topics that we can crack open. So let's start with you, Sensei Melerine. What do you feel is the advantage? How come you're not breaking those classes up? And then are there any disadvantages to blending all the skill levels?
Yes and no, right? And so the advantage is because the lesser experienced people get to see the higher level things, right? They don't, a lot of times the biggest question with that is, I want to do that, right? And yeah, we have to tell them, okay, well, you will be able to do that one day, just not tomorrow, right? It's going to take some time. And I'm sure everybody here has experienced that. And so, but that's a good thing because that intrigues the beginners, right? And it motivates them. It wants to have them coming back for more. And the advanced students, what they get out of the same scenario is the fact that sometimes just because there's somebody with lesser experience, they pose incredible questions or different scenarios, different challenges, which makes the higher level people think more, to think outside of what is the norm for them, which is a tremendous value because a lot of times higher level or higher level experienced practitioners get complacent. They get static, right? And they start to go through routine. Okay, I've been doing this forever, and I'm doing the same thing over and over, and I'm going to do it my way. But then there's no imagination behind. There's no creativity behind. What else does someone else think? And the white belt always gives you that, right? There is no restriction because they're going to ask those innocent questions, which has a tremendous value, right? The disadvantage is only one, and I don't know that it's so much of a disadvantage. Is the higher level belt, they get to work with the lower belts in an effort to have them trained, but then it almost restricts them from performing some of the things that they are capable of doing. So at a higher level, they have to slow it down, and not because they're not learning at a slower level, and not because they're not controlled at a higher level, but because they have to slow it down, may impact a training session for them, training at a higher speed or higher pace, right? But I find in my own experience is the smoother you are, the more that you're going through, the better you are in speed when that time does come, right? And so I don't know that it is a disadvantage for our high belts, but if I had to try to pick one thing, that would be it. It's both sides of the fence, right?
Well, you know, I race cars, and one of our phrases at the track is smooth is fast. You got to slow down to speed up. Yeah, I appreciate that. Hanshi Legacy, let me go to you with this question. You know, since day one of karate, I've been standing next to black belts, and now that I'm a black belt, I'm standing next to white belts. What is the benefit of that, and are there any disadvantages?
No, I don't think there are any disadvantages because, you know, you need the knowledge there. You need, when you look at your students, they want to see that they were well trained as well, you know. And then, like Darryn said, we all have different ideas about certain things. There's more than one bunkai, each technique, and then they look at it differently. So it's good to give a full, wholesome idea of what, say, a particular subject is. I like his idea of creating good value.
Thanks, Hanshi. One word I like to use, Sensei Melerine, is creativity. And then one other idea I want to throw out before I go to Sensei Dolphin is just one thing I like about white belts, either on the ground or standing, is there is a certain erratic quality. And we can get used to a certain look with people who are well trained, but with people who aren't, they might come in an absolutely different direction. And it's great to know our stuff works against that too. Sensei Dolphin, what's your take on the blending of all the ranks and the positives or potential downsides?
I like it. I like to have a mixed class. I also like having an advanced class too. It's funny, we're talking about the white belts. Sensei Legacy always said, if you want to get hurt, fight a white belt. But having said that, you know, in a regular karate class, I think it's great to have them all in there. But even in my fighting classes, I have the white belts in there. We just scaffold it. And as a matter of fact, in those types of classes, I actually don't like lower ranks fight each other unsupervised, right? So when they come to those classes, the benefit is they're going to fight brown and black belts when they fight. They're going to pressure test against those people who have more control. I think for the higher ranking student, it makes them build in some compassion because there is going to undoubtedly be some errors, right? So they have to build in a little bit of compassion. And the student, the lower ranking student, you know, you kind of tell them like, okay, you're with a brown or a black belt now. You can make a couple of mistakes here. Really try and experiment. And that word that we just use, creative, try and be a little creative. Use your karate. Use the things that you've been doing in class against this person. Might not work, but try and do it. And so I think when you have the difference in skill levels, that's one of the many benefits. And that's what I'll go with.
Thanks, Sensei Dolphin. Sensei Suino, where do you go with this?
Man, I love what everybody said. I'm just going to add one more thing to it. You know, the concept of bushi, right? We're servants, and the culture at JMAC is a culture of service. So when you rise up through the ranks, I insist that my students help the others. Like they have to earn the right to stay for the advanced class by working with everybody: brown belts, green belts, white belts. So I think there's many advantages to that. And as we discussed, sometimes maybe the advanced people feel a little impatient, but it makes their martial art better in the long run. And when they get to go to the advanced class, then they can play at a higher speed or whatever. But I think that the essence of what we do, and it sounds like that's true of everybody on this call, is help as I say, a rising tide lifts all boats, right? We help all the students lift up so that you just have a better room to train in next time you come.
Love that. And we have a question from Sensei Panakia, but I do want to get to that in 1 second. But you just used a word, bushi. And I know I was reading a bit about you, Sensei Melerine, and I know that Budo is a word that means something to you. Now, we've talked about that on this show. It was actually, I think, maybe the first question we ever had on Punch Kick Choke Chat of you, Sensei Suino, was about Budo. And so we won't go around the horn on that. But Sensei Melerine, I do want to ask what your take and what your need for the concept of Budo is. And just so you know, you are muted right now.
No, he was unmuted. Now
there we go.
Okay. I was confused because I didn't mute myself for a second.
I muted you because there was a lot of background noise when people
I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. I apologize. Sean, one more time, please, because I was looking.
Oh, just he talked about bushi and the idea of being a servant, and I really like that idea. And I was saying how when I was reading up about you before the show, I know the word Budo came up in some of the literature, and it's something that matters to you. We've discussed this, so we won't go around the horn on this, but what's your take on that, and what does it mean, and why is it necessary?
Yeah, the martial way, right, in Budo is extremely important to me. That's living with integrity. That's living with good characteristics to be a good human being. It's living in honor, right? And so that's why those things mean so much to me, as Budo is related, right? And then I think you may have seen Budoshin, which is also another system that I'm ranked in under Sensei George Kirby, and that's where you may have seen that as well.
Sorry, I was just texting because we're getting our questions in order for you. The question came in is, what's your experience with Gene LeBell? But I also want to break that open because we are interested in Wally Jay, we are interested in Carlos Machado, and we are interested personally very much in Daniel Cormier. So this is your time. So I'd love to share your take on your vibes with them, but also fun or interesting stories you might have about them, because you've trained with some really exceptional people.
Okay, so let's start with Gene LeBell. Gene LeBell and I were very close. Now, obviously, he's passed since, and but he was very close to me. I've spent a bunch of time on a mat. I live in Louisiana, but I frequent California, and periodically when I would go there, I would make sure I'd split my time with Sensei George Kirby, and I would split it with Gene LeBell as well. And then I don't know why I from the first time I know he was close to my sensei, and when I did go out there the first time I ever met him was in New Orleans, in our dojo, and so I spent some time with him in New Orleans in our dojo a few times, and then later on in the years I would frequently go to wherever he was at, and the last time that I spent time with him was in Gokar Shingabian, which I can never pronounce his last name. His gym was the last time that I had seen him before he got sick and passed, unfortunately. But that time was a special time to me when I went there, because it's been some years since I've seen him, and he did not miss a beat with. I mean, I've known him for years, but age catches up with everyone, and to him, no different. But he still was literally on the mat, still had a handshake that was as strong as you can ever imagine. Was still the same old Gene, pushing everybody that was in front of him on the mat to train. And the special part about it was, in the end, he kept me there. It was myself and another close friend of mine, which is my sensei's oldest son, who's very close to me. And so he started pulling out all of, he's renowned for his patches and every other thing he has. But one of the things that was most special to me is he pulled out one of his books. And he just started writing in it, and so he wrote to me in one of his books, and drew, his signature. He always would draw his little, head signature face thing, and signed it for me. And obviously I still have that today. And that was one of the more special times that he's always given me things every time that I've gone, but that was one of the more special times that I had an opportunity to visit with him and spend time with him before his passing.
And I'm
So.
only meeting you tonight, but I get the sense you miss him.
Yeah, I do. I do. And I really wanted to try to make the services, and unfortunately couldn't make it. And that wasn't the easiest thing for me. So I wasn't able to make it. But yeah, I do. I do for sure.
Well, we're huge fans of Lineage here, and what an incredible part of yours. How about Wally Jay? Talk about him. His name's come up a fair bit on this show.
Yeah, so that was in my early days of training, and again, I don't know how my sensei did this without the internet, because I don't know how I would do it without the internet today. But he knew all of these people, and so they would visit us on a regular basis. And again, not even in New Orleans, just outside of New Orleans, into a small dojo, and he was just affiliated with these people that were known all over the place. And so Wally Jay, being one of those people, would come in and visit with us and be able to spend time with us on a mat in our home dojo. And so I had the honor to be able to spend time with him as well.
And how'd you feel? I mean, how does hands feel on you and those locks related to what you already knew?
Yeah, so my sensei, Sensei Jack Garrett, was and still is very proficient in his locks. That let's say he tends to put on. I say, when he's in front of the classroom today, I'm like, I don't know where this guy came from, because that's not the guy that I know making me into an instant sweat. And so it's the same thing with Wally Jay. When they applied a lock on you, and it was not only them. Like, you had these certain people, like a Wally Jay, like Dennis Palumbo, like my sensei Jack Garrett. You had Skip Kepke out of North Carolina that came in. That I don't know if anybody has heard of him. Skip is his nickname, but Burrow Kepke, who's also passed away. But these people would put locks on you, and you would be in an instant sweat. That's how. That's like, I can't emphasize how much discomfort you would be in back in those days. But and look, and Gene, in his own right, going back to Gene LeBell, in his own right, and he had his own thing, like catch wrestling, or the different types of wrestling styles that he had, and using some unique techniques that he would have, and that was very uncomfortable immediately. Like, the application and how effective it was when they immediately touched you, how discomfort it was. You knew that it was extremely effective in what they were doing. And so I would credit all of those. Again, George Kirby as well. All of those people. Sam Combs, another one out of California. Like, all of these people were extremely effective. I can't even name half the people that would be like that. But growing up, those people were extremely effective in the art.
Well, I love the idea that immediate lock created that immediate physiological response. That's true martial arts. And by the way, thanks for mentioning those names. Some of those we haven't heard on the show, and that's so much what we're trying to do. Now, I've spent a fair amount of time with Jean-Jacques Machado, but talk to us about your time with Carlos.
So literally, Carlos, again, another friend of my sensei, Jack Garrett, and he's home based in the Texas area, Dallas, Texas area. Where is he at right now? I keep forgetting the town that he's in, Texas being so big. But
Isn't it Carrollton?
It's
Carroll?
It's right. I don't think his dojo is in Carrollton right now. I think it might have been, and he moved it. But it's close. It's all the same area: Dallas, Carrollton, Fort Worth, all of that area. Same difference, right? Within 20, 30 minutes, I guess, if you will, maybe a little bit longer. But Carlos is a good friend of Sensei Jack as well. I've spent a fair amount of time with him. He's always very hospitable whenever I go to Texas, to invite me over to his dojo, and I've been on a mat with him more times than I can count. And I've been everywhere with him. I've done some joint instructions. He's was an instructor at the Martial Arts Super Show in Vegas, and I was one there. And obviously, I spent some time with him, and he had shared that courtesy back to me as well. He's done clinics over here and seminars over here because there's an affiliation. One of a close friend of mine, Frank Carasi, is one of his affiliates, which is just south of the lake from me. I'm on the north side of Lake Pontchartrain from New Orleans. Jefferson is on the South Shore, and Jefferson is where one of his affiliates is. And so he'll come in to do clinics and seminars over there because that's one of his affiliates. And obviously I'm invited to that all of the time. And then there's another one just east of me northeast of me, where he has some that's up in Mississippi. And so anytime that he comes within this area, they always advise me, and I always try to make his stuff. And so I've been with him in Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, Vegas, wherever you can say it, I've been there with him. And then literally just a couple weeks ago, Hegan as well. And Hegan was here, Machado. And so he had a seminar here at Sensei Carasi's dojo. And I spent some time with him there as well. And I haven't spent as much time with Hegan as I have with Carlos, but I've spent some time with Hegan as well. Both of them, that entire family are great people, and they're extremely knowledgeable, and tremendous amount of honor and respect to them as well.
Absolutely. I love that. Legends.
Yes.
And then, we do have to get to your 10 questions, but before we do that, spend as much time as you like telling us about the champ, Daniel Cormier.
So Daniel was, I haven't had a chance to spend as much time. I did spend time with him on a mat because he came in preparation for one of his fights, and literally the fight that he was going to be fighting for a championship. He was in our dojo prepping for that exclusively before one of his fights. And then from that time, because he is from Lafayette, and that happened to be a New Orleans event back when I think one of the last UFC events that was here or close to New Orleans, that he came in. And so I had an opportunity to work with him inside of one of our dojos there. And then from that point, just randomly, I wound up crossing paths with him in different areas. San Francisco was one of the places that I spent some time or had a chance to visit with him in. And then there was one or two other places that I spent time with him, but the majority of the time that I spent with him was in our dojo in his preparation for a fight.
And one of the things that blows me away about him is how he uses his weight. And I don't mean any extra weight. I just mean watching the way he gets guys, takes them down, guys who think they're going to stay up against the cage. How did it feel to have that pressure on you? And how did it feel? Like, what was remarkable about him that made him so exceptional?
I must say it, and he says it all the time. Not so much anymore, but when he was a fighter, it's exactly what he says. And I think that if you look at that camp, when it was back then, of Kane and Daniel, it was the grind. If you ever heard them referring to the grind, because they were relentless. His bread and butter was wrestling, right? But he was also, in my opinion, he was also a good striker, and an underestimated striker.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so he would use that to be able to do that dirty boxing, that cage pressure, and that the dirty fighting, similar to what I thought was extremely effective when you had Randy Couture winning a lot of things, but Daniel was a bigger person doing it. And so he was extremely effective. And the problem was you can never outlast them. When Daniel was in his prime, you couldn't outlast him. Just like Kane. That's why when people would say Kane would never get tired. Well, who do you think was training Kane all of that time? That was Daniel Cormier, and that's why them two were just relentless. And basically, nobody can really compete with the level that they put themselves through just with each other. And so, to me, it was all about what they always said, which people didn't recognize it. I felt like people didn't recognize it. They would tell everyone all the time, it's the grind. And that's what it was. I think it was the grind. And all of those things just came together for those two.
Well, I love that. And for anybody who watches this show, they know that I just got goosebumps because you said two of my favorite words, dirty boxing and Randy Couture. That's literally why I started grappling, is because I wanted to be able to get closer and be comfortable to hit from there. And obviously Stipe underestimated his punching power in that one match. So
That is true.
yeah. So
But
yep.
when you look at that, Sean, when you before Daniel got to the UFC, he was doing that to everybody. not only Stipe, but when you look at the top competition that he was fighting in the championships that he won prior to coming to the UFC, he was doing that to everybody. And so they didn't recognize that. And obviously that, was to his advantage. And so, yeah, great guy though. Great guy.
Love that. Love that. He comes across like, and I love the relationship he has with those Dagestanis. They just
Yes.
take the piss out each other and they love each other and they train their asses off. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I think because he can relate to them because of the level that they put themselves through, he can relate to that, those Dagestani. So when you look at what he used to do, and that's pretty close to what what he used to be and what he used to do. So I think he relates to that easier.
Love that. I think a lot of people, I know we talked about someone other than you, but I think a lot of people are going to benefit from hearing about that grind and maybe think about how hard they're training right now and maybe up it a little. Who knows?
Right.
Um,
No question.
right on. So are you ready for your 10 questions that we ask all our guests?
Sure, let's go.
Great. So Sensei Dofen is starting a 10-minute timer. Now, we ask that you answer impulsively, but then feel free to expand on your answer as you wish. You got 10 minutes for 10 questions. What is the most effective move in your martial arts arsenal?
Wow. I have an answer for that. I guess off the cuff, I don't know that there's an answer for it. I think it's whatever is necessary for you to perform at the moment of the thing that's happening to you at that moment. If you look at my dojo right now, it's Zanshin. We have a sister dojo, Mushin, and we have another one, Budoshin. And so if you understand what those terms are, and without me getting into that because of the 10-minute time limit, I think if you're not familiar with them, you should go look them up. But that's what it's all about. And if you understand those three terms, that's why there is no one technique. It's whatever is not going to make me think about it. It's how I'm going to respond to be effective.
I love it. And for people listening, he just said Google is your friend. Who is the most influential martial artist in your life?
I would have to lean on, there's a lot of people that's out there, and I have to lean on who put me there, who started me, and it would have to be Jack Garrett. Yeah, I mean, it's an easy question. I mean, that's who put me in martial arts, right? If that's where I started Japanese Jiu-Jitsu, that system, that style, that art, where I am today. He was standing right in front of me still tonight. There's a lot of people that's out there. There's a lot of influencers that are out there. But I mean, if I'm picking somebody else outside of my own personal circle, I would probably be the Chuck Norris or Bruce Lee, like everyone else, right? But if I'm truly looking at it sincerely and wholeheartedly, it has to be Jack Garrett.
Well, the great news is you might be able to answer both because the next question is who's the most influential martial artist of all time and why?
Yeah. I there's people that come to mind, and I like Bruce Lee. I'm a fan just like everyone else is, right? I just never was the person that was like, that's my style, right? Because I believed it had more to it. And so I think it's a combination of different styles. And so when you look at that, I think Chuck Norris was, and I don't know that Chuck Norris can be underrated, right? But when you look at the popularity of between what he has and what people give him credit for, I think then you start to discredit him a little bit because he knew so much more in real life application than people understood just from the theatrical part of him being in film. And so I think in reality, he would the people that he's taught, the things that he's done, the things that he does today, the age that he is today and still doing, the people that he's come across and trained and worked with and doing that, him, Gene LeBell, it's got to be them too.
What excites you most about the next 5 years of your training?
The next 5 years of my training we need a pause time. Like I need to be in the moment right now. I don't know that I want to be in the next 5 years, but it's always learning, right? Being able to continue to learn, continue to evolve, continue to be innovative in what I'm doing to continue to advance and to be a better person all the way around. I don't look at martial arts as what I'm doing on a mat, or if it's something that I use for self-defense outside of the dojo. I use it as every bit in my everyday life. And so evolving in every aspect of that is what I think excites me into the next 5 years and beyond.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you get there?
It would be simple. I would just hope that and look, God forgives everyone, and I don't know that I'm a bad person. I would just like this. I guess if he had to say something to me, is you've done well. It's simple.
They don't have to be good. They don't have to be good in real life, and they don't have to be influential. But who's your favorite film and television martial artist?
I would. I know. I'm gonna get some slack on this one. I always felt like and I don't know him at all. I've never met him in person. My sensei has. I know a lot of people who have met him. I know a lot of people who really don't care for him. I know a lot of communities that really don't care for him. I still think that he has um and has some very technical ability in his style and system of Aikido, and I think that it would have to be Steven Seagal.
Right on. Well, I love Sensei Suino's face on the lead up to that.
I knew it was coming.
Getting juicy.
I'm gonna have to talk to him about that.
Hey, Sensei Legacy said Steven Seagal too.
Shoot, I'm trying to find out the slack I'm gonna get on this one.
Is there a martial artist in all of recorded history, living or dead, that you'd like to train with the most?
I'd like to have some more time with Gene LeBell. I mean, I put a bunch of time with him on the mat. I'd like to have him back.
I'd like that for you too. If your martial art or any arts that you're proficient at did not exist, what art would you like to study the most?
I think it would be a Hapkido. A little bit different than what I'm doing, with a lot more striking, repetitive striking, and I'm very comfortable with that. And so I think that those things are extremely valuable and to segue it into what I do. Whether you're referring it to as a strike or Metsubushi or Temi or whatever you want to call it, those things are extremely effective in being able to be proficient at what you're doing in Japanese Jiu-Jitsu.
What is your greatest achievement and what is your greatest regret? Our last two questions come as a pair.
Greatest achievement to date, it has nothing to do with my own ability or my own achievement. It has everything to do with my encounters, the network of people in martial arts, in the martial arts community, and being able to expand my personal relationships with those people just within that community is I feel like probably the greatest achievement. There's a lot of people inside my own dojo that I've come across, hundreds or thousands, if you will, right, that I've spent my time on a mat with, that have been very, very good to me. And so being able to develop those relationships as we are here today, as you know, we've spent time, as Randy was saying earlier, that you know, the interaction that we've had together and growing those relationships is the more special thing. My greatest regret is not being here sooner. Is just not having the opportunity or not thinking about maybe this is something that I should try sooner. I tell people all the time, I work with adults. My sensei works with children, and adults as well. And so I always tell people, because a lot of people, I get calls every single day. People want me to train different classes, clinics, seminars, whatever it is, or even just come to my regular classes. And then I get people asking me, would I teach their kids? And I just don't do a kids class for no reason, right? I'll come in and I'll help my sensei. Tonight I was on a mat with him with the kids. But he does the kids class. And so my thing is I think that martial arts is something that everyone should do for multiple reasons that anyone ever knows.
Thank you for your 10 questions. How was our time, Sensei Dauphin?
25 seconds to go.
Ooh, cutting
For
it
my
close.
money, that's a win at the 10 questions.
10 minutes,
It's
baby.
that's an impulsive and then expanded upon. Thank you for all those answers. So, we're not at our end yet, but we are soon. And before we do that round the horn end, I do want to ask you about your work with law enforcement, especially SWAT, because I don't know that we've had anyone who specifically worked with SWAT. If so, I'm sorry if I forget. And also your seminars, feel free to promote yourself and put out there what it is you do outside of your own dojo.
Sure. So some of the things that I've done, I've worked with every type of law enforcement agency that's out there, including the SWAT teams that are affiliated with those law enforcement agencies, local police departments, or whatever it is. Multiple different types of drills. Currently, right now, one of our students that's who might be on right now is the I don't know if I could say this, but he's the DT instructor for the Louisiana State Police. So I'll reserve his name, but he's one of our students. He's a high level student with us, and very close to us. And so I'll reserve his name because I don't know if I should be saying that. But yeah, so we do work with them. This is a very experienced person as well. And so one of their objectives is to make sure that they're doing the things that are necessary to not only preserve their own protection, but be able to do it the correct way. And so that's their objective. And so working with them in restraints and come-alongs and doing things the correct way without injuring a potential person that they may have to encounter is a big thing for them. And then I do tactical. One of the most experienced people that tactically that I work with is literally on the call right now, and that's Yogi McGovern. He's one of our black belts, and he's over in Colorado, and he's another law enforcement official that has been through multiple different agencies in multiple states, that is now in Colorado, just left Missouri, was here in Louisiana forever, and moves to different states to be able to work with different agencies in tactical form. So a lot more aggressive, a lot different scenario than what you talk about and what a normal police officer needs to encounter. And then every branch of the military as well. Every branch of the military that I've worked with, it didn't matter. I've done clinics and seminars for them, including their special forces, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Rangers, every one of them. And the enlightening thing about working with those people is it's weird when we see things that are common to us and that we like, yeah, that's basic. They look at it and they're like, how did that happen? What are you doing to me again? And that's kind of a shock, right? Because this is our armed forces and they should have this knowledge, but they have it at such a basic level. And so being able to work with those people, those types of people is very rewarding for me to be able to work with them. And then I know you didn't ask me this, but you were asking me about Daniel a little bit, and you asked me to throw out some other names people that I worked with. And I think you'd find this because I was way back before the UFC days even happened. And so when the UFC first started, I had the opportunity to work with some of the pioneers of the UFC, and one of the people that I worked with exclusively, him and I, prior to his championship fight. So it was one-on-one 1 week before, and we worked on one thing. And the one thing that we worked on was the thing that he won his world championship with, and that was Frank Shamrock. And so him and I were on a mat in my dojo, well, not my dojo, my sensei's dojo at the time. And we worked on the slam that he literally did to win that fight is what we worked on the entire week, every single day. I don't know why he took a liking to me when we were training. He was there to be able to prepare for the fight. And then he picked me to stay with him the rest of the time. And that's the only thing that we worked in. Then some other people that I worked with was BJ Penn as well. And I did that out in Hawaii working with him. And so, and then one of my sensei's sons, the oldest son that I had mentioned that I'm very close with right now, is a two-time IBJJF world champion. And so I'm preparing him for some of those things, and he was undefeated in the fight to wins as well. And so he's been pretty successful with that. So being able to segue into all of these different types of styles or systems to be able to go from a sporting event and understanding those dynamics to real life, and then even life and death scenarios, right? And so that's just a bunch of what I've done and who I've worked with, and then community things as well. So we always try to give back, and I've worked with everyone from the Girl Scouts and doing self-defense things for them to real estate companies and doing like realtor self-defense, because what people take for granted is a realtor, and a lot of times realtors are females. They go into isolated areas, and so we do a specific program that's just for realtors on how and what they need to be looking at to not be vulnerable, and if something does happen, what do they need to do. And I also do a program, and I think you had posted one of the pictures of us doing LSU. And so we have one of the house moms at one of the sororities at LSU, Kappa Delta, that has our program being mandatory. So we're at LSU, Louisiana State University, twice a year minimum, doing women's self-defense and situational awareness. And so those classes, as you can see, are pretty big.
Well, I love that. And we mentioned creativity earlier, and that's such a out of the box way. Like let's get realtors safe. And I also love the idea of you teaching Girl Guides one weekend and Navy SEALs the next. And the one thing I want to say before we do go around the horn is, there was recently a Navy SEAL who challenged Sean Strickland, and the Navy SEAL's grit was undeniable, but his skills were in no way a match for Sean Strickland's, because that man could clear a room and that man could take out an Al-Qaeda member, but when it came to the actual moves, he didn't know what to do against a trained fighter.
So a statement that you made when you're looking at it in a trained fighter. And so I saw this thing, and this is going to take us into a whole nother thing. You might have to kick me off of this for a second, but I'll try to be as quick as I possibly can. I saw this video the other day, and I think it's very relatable to what you just said. There's a video that's out there of an Aikido guy claiming that Aikido is far more superior than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then, long story short, they take those two guys, or that guy and another guy, a BJJ guy, and this Aikido guy, and they put them inside of a dojo, right? And they're like, okay, let's see which artist more superior. And I think what you just said is no different. And the problem with that is this one simple fact: is neither one of whoever did that don't understand martial arts. That's my opinion statement right up front. And I'll defend that to the end, because the difference is Aikido is not designed for somebody to be able to expect that you know something. It's designed to be able to use in self-defense when the person that is attacking you doesn't know that you're going to do something, that you have this ability, right? And so that whole dynamic has changed when you put somebody. It's not like you're going to put them up against somebody to fight, especially. And they didn't even do any BJJ for that matter. The guy the BJJ guy was far more athletic, stronger, superior, athletic, everything, and just slapped this guy around until he crumbled on the ground, right? The Aikido guy. But that's never how an effective Aikido person would be able to use that art in self-defense. And I think that the scenario that you said is no different. Those two things are totally different. You have one that's in a sporting environment. It's a brutal sport. Don't get me wrong. It is. And no discredit to Sean Strickland, because he's an incredible fighter, right? But what he does is combat sports in a sanctioned match with a referee. But it's not life or death, and anything and everything goes. And I'm not saying that he couldn't defend himself in that type of scenario either. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that those two dynamics are completely different. And I think looking at it in that regard, people are misunderstanding the effectiveness of what an art can do, when it truly is level for level the same. And when it is used in the scenario that it's designed for, right? Aikido, you're not going to square that person up with somebody. Their whole thing is to not be in a confrontation. They're gonna do whatever they can to avoid that, but they need that commitment in an attack, that intent and that commitment in an attack to be able to have their style to be effective when that person don't know about it. And so you take everything away from that individual when you put them in that environment. And so the same difference here. If you're talking about, okay, now I could do everything else because what is illegal or outside of the rules when you're in a real life or death scenario? There is no rules, right? And so everything else applies. And I'm not saying that a Sean Strickland couldn't do that. I'm just saying you take the ability of that individual that may be more experienced in doing the things that he might need to do in an effort to preserve his own safety away from him. So you put it back into a rule aspect.
I absolutely appreciate that perspective, and I'm glad we took the time to talk about it. I'm afraid the time is, however, real, and we're about to go around the horn and talk about our time with you, and then the last word will go to you. And before we do that, I just want to thank our crew behind the scenes: Robert Schlumsky, Justin Shea, Andrei Sedashev, Alden Adair, Josh Kitchens, Christiana Landol, Dridi Guliani, Stavros Stavroulias, and Emily Ruth Driscoll. Thank you for all you do for this show. Hanshi Legacy, what do you want to say about our time tonight?
Okay, I just want to mention too that I trained with Wally Jay on and off for 10 years. I was in a relationship to Richard Kim from San Francisco. Yeah. Darryn, you have good values and provide good learning experiences for your students. That's what I get from this conversation. And you're sincere and you have good intentions. And I like the thing that you said at the end is so true, but about pitting one art against another. People don't understand that are outsiders, that they're not intended to be put into a sport like that. Thank you very much for coming on our program. It was an enjoyable chat. Hope to see you sometime at Capital Conquest. All right.
Thanks, Hanshi Legacy. Sensei Suino?
Man, I love this. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's so good to see you. I feel like this went by so fast, we barely got a chance to dig into all the topics, so maybe we'll have to do it again. But anyway, good to see you on the call. Thanks for your time. And once again, thank you so much for the massive amount of help you gave us up in Ottawa last time. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Sensei. Sensei Dauphin?
I always read a lot of notes. No different, but because we're on a compacted timeline here, right off the hop, you said about taking care of your family, your brothers, like family first. That got me hooked right away. As Sensei Legacy saying, I already knew you were a nice person, but it was nice to listen to you talk about that for an hour. I like your seeking practical martial arts. I like that you're bold about saying I'm trying to innovate things. A lot of people will buck against that, but that doesn't mean you're not traditional in what you're doing. It just means you're trying to innovate it for your life and the way you're living your life and the things you do. And I really like that. I like your thought on Budo, living with integrity as a good human being. It was really nice to talk about the Champ and Judo Gene LeBell and Wally Jay. Just nice to hear your perspective on all those people. Your 10 questions, a couple of things really jumped out at me. The most effective move, everybody, I said reverse punch, this and that, but I actually think you're really right. It depends on the moment and what's going on in that moment. If your hands are behind your back, then your reverse punch isn't going to be the most effective. It's going to be something else. You clearly have a really deep respect for your sensei, Jack Garrett. That came across as well, and it's nice to hear that from you. Next 5 years, always learning, innovating, being a better person. Heaven, you've done well, right? Again, just reaching into that, want to be a good person. listen, Sensei Legacy also said Steven Seagal, and I'm not gonna lie, I like watching, a copy of Above the Law. It's good entertainment, man. Like I like his movies. It's just yeah, it's good entertainment. You want to train with Gene LeBell again? It's nice that you trained with somebody, and if you could train with anybody living or dead, it would be that person that you trained with once before. Your achievement, it's a really good one. Because I never thought about it, but I'm actually proud of a very similar thing, Sensei. The network of people and growing those relationships as we just did tonight with each other, right? We've grown that a little more. I like that. And last thing I want to say is, we all talk about this like crazy. Why don't more people do martial arts? Like not only law enforcement, why don't Girl Guides do martial arts? Why don't real estate agents do martial arts? I could think of a couple political leaders in 2 countries in North America that would really benefit from a martial arts attitude and mindset. So I agree with you completely on that. And it was just so good to talk to you again. I know we'll see you again. Can't wait to see you there or here. I'll happily see you and be on the floor with you anywhere. And thank you for coming on the show tonight.
And the last thing I want to say before you'll say goodnight is 2 things that stuck out for me, because I get to chat so much during the shows. Just when you said always take care of your brothers, whether they're by blood or by choice. Absolutely. And the other thing is, every time you talked about the people you worked with on the mats, we can all watch somebody in a seminar, but who are we on the mats with? And I just love how important that term was to you, because it's important to me. How do you want to say goodnight to everybody?
Before I get into that, I'd also like to thank some of the support that I have around me here today, with one person that's always with me. And I introduced them yesterday, but again today, just so everybody knows that, all my technical support and everything goes to Brandon Kime. So he's always with me doing everything that I have, and I appreciate him being behind the scenes. He's the guy behind the cameras for whatever you see me doing. So I appreciate his commitment to me, and he's also a very personal friend of mine. So thanks to him. Look, everything that everyone said, I would love to come back anytime that y'all would have me. I can't wait to the next time that we're all together again. And I love how y'all put me over here. Like, we were all putting these mats together, but that was me putting all of these mats together. They were over there pointing the finger at me. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, that was look, it's way more than just putting the timing together for us to go out, and not only us but everyone else to be able to cut that day. And it's all about the engagement that we have with each other, and how we're growing, as Randy was saying. And so yeah, I look, it sounds like work, and we were there for like a few hours, but I appreciated the time to be able to spend with them and get to know them better, and even more, both Nicholas and Randy. So I appreciate that opportunity. When I walked in, they were like, "Are you lost?" And I'm like, "No, I'm here to help." And they're like, "Are you sure?" I think so. Yeah, we'll get to rolling then. And so they put me to work really fast. But I appreciated that. And Hanshi, very, very nice talking with you today. Sean as well. And I appreciate this. I can't emphasize enough. I said it in the beginning. I'll say it again. I will be glad to come back anytime that y'all would ever have me, but very much appreciated being here today. It was an honor.
Thank you so much. Thank you for watching, everybody. We appreciate you being here, especially the new viewers on Zoom. We really appreciate it. Good night, everybody.
Thanks.
Take care, everybody.